Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this workshop on the long-term plan. Just a reminder, we've got this being live streamed as well. So quite involved discussions on what's going to go into our long-term plan. We've got some specific topics that came through. Some were various ones that we consulted on, and some things that some people submitted on, and there's also a number of other things that were brought in for discussion today. So as we work on forming our long-term plan, this is going to be one of the key sessions for that. So welcome everyone. Hand over to Acting Chief Executive, Lisa Bailey.
Thank you and good afternoon. Once again, I'd really like to thank the team for the preparation for this afternoon's LTP session. This is a really valuable opportunity to consider those projects and initiatives that are still outstanding, both from our LTP list and from our submissions. It's a good opportunity today for us to get direction from our governance team to us in the nearly 20 areas that are highlighted for this afternoon, and it is going to require some brave direction to be given to us. I just wanted to comment that this long-term plan has seen a tremendous increase in engagement from our community, with 654 submissions received. And we certainly appreciated this engagement and the nearly 70 who came and spoke to their submissions as well. All of this has certainly shaped the many discussions on LTP to date. And of course, some of these directions are still to come from you today on those outstanding matters. So just acknowledging that, I'll hand over. Thank you.
So just in the interest of time, I'll keep the intro brief. Obviously, we're talking about the outstanding initiatives and anything that we hadn't landed on after we heard from submitters on the 31st and 1st of April. I will pop, I've got an Excel spreadsheet that I'll pop up. I'll share my screen occasionally when it's needed. So I'll start with these. The first ones that we're going to get into is in the digital space. And so then, yeah, I'll pop it up when we need to reference it. And it's got a list of all of the topics that we're going to go through today, and the cost specifically in the 26 financial year, and whether it's CapEx or OpEx, so we can get an idea of, so if it's capital, then it's typically debt funded. And if it's OpEx, we typically need to rate fund for it. So just bear that in mind. And it's also really important that we stick to time, given that the amount of topics that we need to get through in a short amount of time. So we've given an indication of timing here, and the presenter will speak, and then we're going to ring a bell similar to what we do with the hearings. And so hopefully we can keep things moving along. There'll be some question time, and then we'll ring the bell, and would really appreciate some clear direction before we move to the next topic. So I'll start with Therese.
Okay. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to start just by explaining what the projects are covering for these LTP initiatives. I've split it into two. The first explanation I'm going to give is about the 3 in progress, so already approved initiatives. So if you're looking at your spreadsheets, that's 1015, 2453 and 448. So GIS renewal, digitisation of property files, and Waitaki in the cloud. So what these 3 projects deliver, they directly support our community outcomes. The digitisation project transforms 13,000 property files into secure, accessible digital records, enabling 24/7 self-service for our community once they're all online. The GIS replacement streamlines essential spatial information, improving how our services are accessed and viewed spatially, which is a more modern and intuitive way of working for staff, contractors, partners, local business, and for public. The cloud migration project protects us from system failure risks. That's called Waitaki in the cloud in your spreadsheet. It protects us from system failure risks while converting capital to operational expenses, ensuring we only pay for what we use. These digital initiatives contribute to a prosperous district, supporting local business through improved access to information, and provide a foundation for robust core infrastructure and services. So that's the first 3. I'm now going to talk to the new initiatives. So you can see them there with the LTP new. Right, so these 5 proposed initiatives are essential investments for our transformation program. Back office optimization and information management eliminates duplication, streamlines workflows, and ensures legislative compliance while boosting productivity. The Partnership Collaboration Portal directly supports our strategic priority to facilitate strategic relationships through a secure platform for our community partners. The integration platform will enable data sharing between systems, reducing errors and improving both staff and customer experience. The Smart District initiative promotes a greater voice for Waitaki through innovative engagement tools like story maps and interactive rate spend visualizations. These digital initiatives contribute to strong communities, a prosperous district, and enhance staff's ability to deliver excellent service efficiently. And just before we move on to questions, you may recall at a council meeting last year, Guy questioned the significant budgeted costs in the Pathway to Progress project and digitisation of property files. And I committed to investigating the high forecast expenditure for these 2 projects over the next 9 years at that meeting. And this is my opportunity to let you know the savings that have been made. So we reviewed our 16 digital services projects to provide more realistic budget amounts, and we reduced 5.6 million in forecast expenditure from the LTP over the next 9 years. We made the following adjustments in order to do this. We removed 2.2 million forecast for the Pathway to Progress Waitaki in the Cloud project. We removed 1.5 million forecast for the digitisation of property files from the LTP budget. And we eliminated 5 projects completely, removing a further 1.9 million forecast for digital services projects from the LTP budget. We also removed 450,000 from this financial year. So that's just to give you an idea that we've gone over this and made some savings already. But now open to questions.
Thank you very much. Councillors. Tim.
In relation to the 5.6, was it, Teresa, that you talked about being removed? Has that been removed in totality, or has any of it been repurposed into operational?
No deferring. So we removed those projects that we thought we wouldn't be able to deliver or were no longer relevant, because transformation program has sharpened our focus on where we should be spending money. With the digitisation of property files, we looked at it, and because we've now got an approved contract, we could be more certain about how much we needed to spend in that project to get the digitisation finished. So we were able to remove the 1.5 million from that budget. And the Waitaki in the Cloud, we looked at it and thought that we would be able to deliver more quickly. So we removed essentially a 5-year spend over the remainder of that LTP.
And so I was wondering if you could just touch on the 5 projects that were removed, and then also, have we seen any increases in the OPEX space for IT, kind of corresponding with the decrease in any of our capital works program?
So we removed the Talent Pipeline Scholarship and Cadetship program. The Hanson replacement has been removed. CRM, because we're using our authority system for CRM. E-services, transformation identity management, because we're once again using authority for that, so we don't need to go out and seek a new tool. And just checking if there's anything else. People and capability we removed, which was a new initiative, as well as the enterprise data management and reporting.
So the Hanson one, that's GIS, is it? What was that project?
That was our asset.
Asset management.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Tim.
And then just the question regarding, have we seen any as a result of the removal of any of these capital items, have we seen any kind of subsequent lift in any of the operational space? You know, the example's been given in the past about, you know, removing the need for hardware and shifting to subscription-based kind of activity, which would then become an operational type expense.
Not yet, because these were initiatives for these, so they were really over and above. So it wasn't a conversion of a CapEx to an OpEx in this case.
Software licenses.
Yes, I will touch on the software licenses. So the software license budget, you'll notice, has grown from last year, and Paul touched on it very briefly in the 2 minutes that he had in the last meeting, which was about the fact that we've consolidated budgets that were existing in departments. So what we expect to see over the next year is rationalisation of some of that software license spend, because we've now got visibility of what's being spent. So the lift is because you're seeing a centralising of license spend that has previously been distributed around departments.
Just very quickly, sorry if you did mention it, but the property file digitisation, is that just all going to get finished in the 1 year, or is it multi-year?
It's over 1 year. We're looking at it September 2026, I believe, off the top of my head. But yes, that's going to get finished within the budget.
Right.
So,
Okay, thank you very much.
yeah.
John?
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm a wee bit confused that's all under CapEx. In my silly mind, that a lot of that's operations. Not that it's where it's placed and where it takes an effect in the rates would be one good. But how much of that you've got slated in for this year, 25, 26, can it be equalised across 26, 27 without adjusting or making the terms of what you're trying to get done more difficult? And where I'm coming from with that is IT moves all the time and changes all the time. So how much of this is actually straight out necessary right now, and how much could actually be pushed aside for 12 months on the basis that is it doable with the stuff we've got and we were heading for?
I would say the one that could get pushed out would be the smart district, because that is what I would see as being an over and above value add to the community, but not something we've committed to within a transformation program. The other projects are really required in order to shift us into a place of efficiency and better service for our customer. So
what you were saying is that's a one-off cost to get more efficient.
there are OpEx costs associated with this. Amanda, did you want to talk to that?
Yeah, well, so these are, one-off capital costs to get the new system in place in the 26 financial year, so that going forward, we've got these new ways of working, these systems are in place. So that's where the big cost happens. There may be an increase in software licenses and associated costs in the longer term operating, but we haven't increased the operating budget for those, because we're presuming that there'll be cost savings elsewhere and the operating budgets will end up there or thereabouts.
Thank you.
Anything else? Tim?
I just had a question regarding digital services and IT in general. Are we kind of looking at the role that AI can play in the workplace, like taking a big picture, kind of look at the whole setup and where things could be?
Sorry, absolutely. So we've got our AI policy that's out for consultation now, and we've got some guidelines going around that. So AI does provide opportunities for a district that's got a low population base relatively per square kilometre as we've got. I really see this as instrumental for us being able to do more with less. So as we're in this financially constrained environment, the enablement of responsible use of AI is going to empower our staff to be much more productive. So yeah, I see it playing a very good role. And as long as there are the guidelines that go along with that, the safe and responsible use of AI, I think the community will see a difference in our efficiency as well.
I think it's something that affects us, the governance team as well, and using it, etc. So, just when you're out for consultation, is there a voice that we should have in that policy?
I'd love you to read it. And so I'll send that through. That's not a problem. And I'm also really would love to give you a session on how to use AI. Particularly some of the really well-known LLMs like ChatGPT and Claude. It will also help you with the large volume of documentation that you've got. Obviously, you have to verify everything. You can't outsource to an AI, but it's certainly a help for all of us.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Was there at one point a budget line in there for a strategy? Is it gone? Visual
Yeah,
strategy?
that was this year already. So yeah, it's actually.
So can we get some direction from the room? We need to move to the next topic. So I've the spreadsheet out the side, columns X and Y. Green is where this is what's in the budget right now for 2026. The CapEx lines there. So yeah, we just need some direction whether green go ahead or whether you want to defer or remove any of these items.
John?
Well, as Teresa's already indicated, is it 142? It could go. And I think as long as there's I'm not a computer whiz, but I do know that IT is the way to go in the future. And if we need to spend some of that so we can actually save costs further down the road, well, so be it. But if we can put it across the 2 years, it will certainly be to benefit to the district on the basis that the staff that we have can get it done in time.
What was the Smart District one? Sorry.
That would be initiatives like rates visualizations, story maps. It's engagement with the community, that kind of thing, sensing, IoT, Internet of Things, sensors, those sorts of things. So they were not part of transformation. It's just with my background in smart cities, I thought it'd be really great to do something similar here. However, it's not.
Not very smart.
We are
Yeah,
very smart. We're very smart.
Just acknowledge some people get triggered when you say smart cities, but actually it's actually just working smarter and it's actually getting efficiencies. And I don't think we should defer 50,000 of loan funding to actually be more efficient. Putting it off isn't going to help us at all, whereas actually doing it will help us. That would be my view on that. Brent?
Look, first of all, congratulations on trimming what you have so far, which is a massive achievement. So I guess in my mind, I guess you've pretty much left here what we need to get on with. I tend to agree with Gary on that one. It is the way that places are moving. If we don't look into the future a little bit and start, there has to be a time to start. And we're not talking a really big, it's not going to make a massive difference to our end goal here today, but it will in the future. And a lot of the things that we've spoken about today is what's going to happen in years 4, 5 and 6. So I think we have to make a start at some point, but yeah, congratulations on that.
Thank you. Hannah?
It's just a query, if we're going to establish all of that software and the work, is the implementation going to be completed within the next financial year is what I'm hearing from what John is saying. So do we have the capability and the capacity to deliver on that, to justify the spend within the next 25, 26?
Yes, it's a lean implementation, that's for sure, Hannah. So some of the nice to have things such as better change management that which we would ideally have in these sorts of projects, will have to be leaner. Things like training, we won't be able to have dedicated trainers. So we've already looked at the compromises that we'd make. So it will be lean, but we can do it.
Roger?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of downward pressure on the building consenting software. So I'm
fairly comfortable that we'll come in under that budget you've got there. At the moment, there's a lot of interest from one vendor to capture our custom.
Okay,
Should we move to the next topic?
so move on to better off funding. And Joe.
So Mel's going to speak to the Better Off funding today, and there's two key aspects to it. The remaining funds which are left over from the Better Off funding and where we are looking at directing that. And excuse me. And also what that's going to look like for the future.
Thank you. Christy and Mel. That's it.
There we go. Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Joe. We're very fortunate to have had the Better Off monies from the government. If looking at community development and economic development, we had just over 2 million, 2.19 million. And that was after we gave 550,000 back to Local Waters Done Well. At the moment, we are currently looking to carry forward into 25-26, almost $1 million. And that's split around 400,000 with placemaking, around 300,000 with Forward Waitaki, and just over 200,000 with Healthy Homes. So Healthy Homes is part of that budget too. The Healthy Homes budget, just to start with that one, that really is mainly going to be used for FTE resource. So a chunk of that will be Kayla's salary, but she's also looking at programs that can housing development opportunities, which also include things like Healthy Homes, Hotter Homes, Curtain Bank. So there's a number of sort of community-led initiatives within that. So that's the money within the Healthy Homes budget. The Forward Waitaki budget has been primarily spent on the land use diversification project, and that's with Rebecca's time. But there are monies in there under business innovation and growth and capability. And that is monies that we're looking now to focus on how do we amplify that whole land diversification project. So it's looking at developing the full value chain, looking at an entrepreneurship ecosystem, looking at how we develop value-added products in Waitaki using the medicinal crops that we're growing now. So there'll be capability development, but we're also looking at new technology opportunities to working with local businesses. So there's a chunk of work that hasn't been fully scoped yet because we're in process with the land use trial. But I think that would be a very effective use of that money if we really do, because the goal with that land diversification project is to retain as much of the value chain as we can within the district. So that work hasn't been scoped yet. And I would say the placemaking role and the Forward Waitaki role, both of those roles are finishing at the end of this fiscal. Cindy finishes in May and Rebecca in June. And it's an opportunity to step back and go, well, what do we want to focus those monies on, and what capability and skills do we need to bring in to ensure we have a fast start into 25-26? The placemaking monies, that's where the bulk of the monies are left. You might recall we split the monies across the townships. So each of the townships outside of Oamaru had 240,000, of which 15 was allocated to the placemaking lead. And that money has now almost been, it's been, in fairness, it's been spent in Omarama, in Otamatata, they've fully spent. Omarama, we're hoping there'll be a final proposal for the remaining funds, which is about 70K at this month's community board meeting. The Palmerston project is behind, and there is discussions that there's about 100K that's been allocated for the Puketapu Trail, and there's in discussions now to go, well, what do we want to do with that money? Because at the moment, we're not making it stalled. So there's discussions there, but the idea is that would transfer into 25-26. And if it's not allocated to the Puketapa Trail, our recommendation would be that it's allocated to placemaking activation within Palmerston, because there's not been a lot of love in the CBD there. The remaining monies, the placemaking monies that are sitting in Oamaru, you will recall we've done a number of trial initiatives. One of them was the 5 CBD community-led projects. And that included the Thames Street trial, and you'll be having a paper coming to you, I think, in the next week or so with a summary of that trial and recommendation on moving forward. But one of the discussions we've been having internally is there an opportunity to enhance the area around the library? And particularly the museum and the library, and look at better, because we want to make that now into a more compelling space that the community uses more frequently. So looking at enhancing the outdoor area on that with better seating, better shelter, and so on. We've also, we signed off part of the money from the Oamaru money was for the master plan, the Oamaru master plan. And previously we've talked about which of the catalyst projects within that master plan do we want to activate. And one of them is wayfinding and signage. And the other was an adaptive toolkit to support building owners to improve their buildings and support more accommodation, particularly in the CBD. So there's a bit of discussion to be had around how do we want to cut those monies, and there's still work to be done in terms of scoping out what the options are and what the costs would be. So that hopefully that just gives a bit of a sense of where we are with the remaining Better Off funds. But as I say, there is around $1 million sitting there, which we can carry forward into 25-26. The government has given us until June 2027 to spend that money, but the intent at the moment is to spend it as quickly as we can, because the chances are, there might be a change in they might change their minds, as they did with Local Water's done well. So we're trying to spend it. Ideally, we'd send all of it now in the next fiscal.
Thank you, Mel. Just a question on Onamatata. You said that's fully expended. I thought we'd spend 106,000. Did we spend more than that?
We've spent it all, because we did it on the enhancement of the state highway there, and then I think it was only like 18,000 left. So that's
Okay.
that's gone.
So there is 18 left.
It's all
The-
been allocated.
Okay. As in spent, or
No, it's all been spent.
okay, all spent. Right, John.
Sorry, Mel, I'm totally confused. So you said there's a carryover 1.3 million, did I hear that correct?
No, we've got 900,000 to carry over.
Right, and you've got,
Yeah, okay, it was, but it's, I'm sorry. I've got the very, very latest data. So the guys have been busily putting in all their invoices, and the invoices they've come in the last couple of weeks. So that's probably why there's a wee bit of a difference. Yeah.
right, so, but the 4 items you've got up there, that is to be rate funded, is that correct? It's not out of the 900,000? So,
It's all from Better Off funding from the government. So
It's not rates.
It's no rate.
okay, so what you've got left over should cover off what you're proposing there.
Oh, yeah, yes, that's what we've been looking at. What money have we got from the government that we can now spend on developing economic and community opportunities without tapping into ratepayer,
Right.
without the ratepayer having to pay.
No, thank you.
We've had some indications from Amarama that they no longer want to spend it on the sports field, that they want to spend on the car park. Equally, I think they should be considering whether we put it against their water upgrade that they've had. That's costing their ratepayers a lot, and if we can take whatever the amount is, 200,000 odd off their water debt, then that will just alleviate those rates a little bit. But just raise that, and I'm not sure if Brent has any opinion on that, but I think it's something we should be talking with them about.
Yeah, look, I think they've had 2 projects that have been very front of mind for them, which is the car park and the other, but that is an option and being put to a community. But I'm sure how much of a difference it would make to rates for them, but yeah, if it's going to lower rates overall and equally throughout the area, then perhaps that is something to look at.
Yeah, there's 70k left in Omarama, and we've been asked to support and writing a paper for the next community board on Feeling car park. So I think that's maybe the community board is the point to have the discussion around, is that the right option? Because we're open to.
What would be the possibility of repurposing it as they've suggested?
It would need to be within the, it would need to be within the master plan for Omarama. If we're
The
going to use
government
better off funds.
has already asked councils to reallocate to water projects, so that's why my suggestion, I think, will be fully supported by central government in this particular instance. But yeah, we do want to hear from what the community says, and yeah, we are also their voice, not just the community board, and I think that needs to be remembered. Hannah?
I was just going to make a comment about that too, if it met the criteria and the eligibility to use the Better Off funding. The other query that I had, and I know it's slightly off topic, is are any of these topics going to be included in the regional ED summit, Otago? It's another way to leverage additional support.
Funny, I've just saw some draft slides last night, actually, that I have actually just added affordable housing as one of them, because that was one of the things that we put forward as a regional deal. We're having a meeting tomorrow to look at the slides, but I think it's going to be at a higher level. But a fair point.
Just again, benefit of being here for too long. Palmerston's had 2 Main Street upgrades in the last 20 or so years, so it's not like there hasn't been love there. Again, that allocation of that funding, if it was going to go away from Puketapu track, they still need a lot of water infrastructure replaced and so on. So again, a possibility for down that area would be my comment. Thank you, Tim. Just the yeah, I do want to make sure that we're actually using this as best as we can. We have had approaches from around the Harbour Street trial and so forth, and it's you know, that the sort of trust has been put off from that for some time, but I just raised that as a possibility of using some funding to actually instigate something, not just a trial, but actually do make some meaningful progress on that. And yeah, I think the whatever comes out from the master plan for the North End, it would be good to have something held in reserve to actually do something with implementing that. I think the Southern Thames Street trial was very useful, but I think actually implementing anything from that would be, you know, cost quite a bit of money, needs to be, obviously there was some good learnings from it, but I think there's some better use for the money overall. Happy to hear from anyone else on any of the allocations. Okay, thank you. Right, next one. We're going to be talking about the airport. That's you again, Joe. So, microphone, please.
Okay, thanks to Claire for coming to talk to the airport, specifically focusing on, I believe, the planned, excuse me, budget, which was to resurface the runway and the lighting. Claire and I spoke earlier today. I do actually have a suggestion that we consider, given that we have a master plan to follow and we're trying to do some work with the present leases out at the airport. We would like to put forward, excuse me, the suggestion that we actually postpone this for a year as a project. And the reason for that being, we think we've got a lot more data to collect to really understand exactly what needs to be done there. And decisions made around certification for the airport, should we progress to develop and grow in that area. So given those key factors, consideration of postponing the project for a year, an additional year.
Jim?
Thank you. I've got no problems with it being postponed for 12 months. Because I actually believe that there are other opportunities in this space. And in fact, the opportunity really is in talking with the government and their desire currently to have a trade agreement with India. And they also have a provincial growth fund or whatever it's called now. That they need to be made aware that allowing us to facilitate growth for the academy, which is principally supplying pilots to India, would be a sound political move on the government's behalf at this stage.
Totally agree. We know there's new technologies there. We know that the current users of the airport, the daily users aren't needing a significant upgrade. There are a number of airports that are using steel guard as a new surfacing material. It'd be good to see what that looks like, and that would be around about half the price, according to the numbers that I've seen elsewhere. Also, the lighting technology is different. I don't know that I don't know what the latest information is that we've got. Are we basing our costs on the latest technology, which doesn't need a lot of heavy cabling and so on, or is it just renewing what we've got in the way we have it currently? Clear. Thank you.
We haven't got any current costings for the lighting at this point. It was done about a year ago. And I think the money that was put into the LTP was around solar lighting, not the cabling. But obviously we'd have to revisit and see what the actual costs are and what options there are.
Mm-hmm.
If there is better technology out there, we'll certainly find it.
Yeah. Thank you. John?
Yeah, look, again, this is a case of it needs done. It's in my mind is a strategic asset for the district. To defer it for a year, that's probably fine. But there's a whole lot of other things that need to happen in the background to do that. And so I think by pushing it off for a year, we should be looking at other options on how the whole system has worked out there. But also bear in mind, it's not going to be one of those kicking the cans down the road, because what is need to be done is to protect the assets that are out there. And if you don't protect it and the water gets in there, the cost of that number could have another one in front of it. So it's got to be done sooner than later.
Yeah, I think we fully acknowledge that, John, great point. Thank you very much. Claire and I have had extensive discussions, and as much as we would really like to do it this year, as I said earlier, we have a lot more to do at the airport, and there is some operating costs going to have to be spent out there to ensure that we do get the information that we need and we do make the best choices for the future.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Thank you, Leah. Right, we're going on to the freezer building, and we've got Mark Reynolds and is going to speak to that. Hi, Mark. Click the microphone on when you're ready to go.
I just wanted to bring you up to date with some work that's going on in the background relating to the freezer building. So Mark Smith has been in contact with us, and there is a couple of engineers and urban designers who are interested in, not only fascinated with Oamaru's heritage, but also interested in doing some work pro bono in regards to strategic approach to the freezer works building in particular. So what we've proposed is that initially there was 250,000 in the budget for next year. We've proposed that it gets split 50 and 200 in the following year. The 50 allows us to see what these guys have got to present to the wider team, and whether we need to do any other investigative works relating to the freezer building. The options they are looking at are basically a like a ruin, and but a one that can be visited by visitors to the district and also the district. So the thing we need to be mindful of is it is a hazardous site. We are only managing the hazard by putting a fence around it. And also, because it's listed heritage, we can't allow it to fall apart because that's an offence as well. So that's the proposal, put 50 in so that we can see what the strategic proposal comes to us as. And the first meeting for that is on May the 6th.
Thank you. And John.
Look, I might be a bit brutal here, but we've got Totra down there that does everything and explains the frozen meat industry. We've got a building that's on the seaside of the railways that is going to fall in there shortly. It's got a land value of 69,000. It's got an improvement value, which is the building at 13,600. And that's the GV 2018. Why don't we just talk to the Omri Fire Brigade and say that's a practice place and put a match in and see if they can put it out fast enough? Job done.
Most of it's stone, the roof would burn, but we're not a lot else to be fair, but yeah. Well, I guess we can see what comes of it, but you know, we've been waiting and talking about something coming of it for a long time, and it's just getting older and more derelict, and yeah, I guess that's the challenge. It is a you know, a very large can that we kick down the road, but I'd rather see that, you know, something is done just in a way of having it as a bit of a memorial to the industry back in the day, but you know, make it safe, knock down to the bottom couple of few blocks, and leave it be from there. Tim, what's your view on it?
Oh, thanks. I mean, given there's been the offer pro bono of doing some work in that space, I think it'd be silly not to see, you know, what that yields. But I think in parallel to that, we need another work stream available, or an intended work stream of, you know, seeking permission from the minister to demolish if there's not a workable or affordable approach to what's put forward.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I'm getting at. You know, our ratepayers can only afford to upkeep, you know, so many heritage buildings, and this is perhaps just the one too many. But John, your further thoughts, and then Jeremy.
Well, I'll probably just carry on that we have a building worth $13,500. We've got a $250,000 investigated fund, I suppose, for want of a better way of putting it. And we've got to make some hard yards, and this is one of the ones we've got to do. So of no future benefit to me, in my mind, to the district.
Well, I think given the protections on it, as Tim has said, you know, we need to go down that pathway and look at, you know, are they able to be removed sufficient that we can actually do something that we're talking along the lines of. Equally, if someone comes up with a brilliant idea and someone with many millions of dollars comes along to carry out that idea, then that's great too. Jeremy?
I just noticed, is it listed in as part of the landmark package, the national landmark that we're talking about tomorrow?
I don't have the answer. Sorry.
No, it's not. Jim?
If the building aesthetically has importance historically to New Zealand, then New Zealand should rebuild it, not the ratepayers of Waitaki. So I stand with the Grinch from Corriedale, bulldoze it.
Thank you. Okay. Bit of direction there, hopefully. Yeah. Okay. By the way, Mark, congratulations on your wedding over the weekend. Really good that Deirdre finally said yes to you. So congratulations. Okay, next we have Josh talking about the forestry at the reservoir.
Hello, thank you very much. We currently have 6 different areas up at the up beside Ardgowan Dam on Ardgowan Road that are planted in forestry. Each of those has different harvest periods set to them. We're overdue for one particular area, which if we go and harvest in the traditional manner, is highly likely to create some sediment concerns for the dam and potentially impact on council's water supply. So the intention here is to go through and thin trees and replace with natives, which is obviously a far more onerous process than going through and widespread cutting. And then we have another area coming up, which is due for harvest, from which we should net a $30,000 profit or thereabouts.
So essentially the plan is to retire it from pine plantation overall?
If that's the direction we want it to go in, yes. Yeah, the intention would be to retire it from pine plantation. We move it into natives. We claim some ETS levies where there are some available, but otherwise it becomes primarily a recreation reserve rather than a plantation forestry.
And for the benefit to the reservoir itself, other than sediment runoff, is there any other benefit? You know, I don't know, reduction in pollen or whatever it might be.
I wouldn't think that we'd get any noticeable improvement in the water quality itself. However, it would be preferable that we have less heavy machinery in and around what is Oamaru's water supply.
Thank you. Tim.
I just have a question regarding this one. If there's work, you know, in and around the dam safety space and, you know, consideration around future supply of water and where that comes from, etc., are we better to perhaps look at deferring this project and then say, for example, if there's going to be wholesale change in that space, then we could just come in and do it far more efficiently and once we know what we're doing in due course. But that may or may not be realistic. It's just my immediate question.
I think there would be the capacity to delay part of the project. There are some trees that are definitely nearing end of life that do need thinning out to ensure that the public are protected, because there are now walking tracks through that space. We are ending up with some situations where there's a number of branches and limbs that are falling and some that are suspended above the tracks there. So we do need to go in and undertake some maintenance on those. But if we were to be looking at Ardgowan Dam in the long term and potentially change the operability of that dam, then we could go in and do some more widespread changes later on. So I'd suggest that we reduce the budgets available rather than potentially completely deferring them.
By how much would be your recommendation on that basis?
I'd suggest that we could deal with the majority of trees that are nearby the walking tracks that potentially have a risk to people that are walking through those spaces, for probably a third of the budget that we've got here, which just wouldn't have the added benefits of transitioning things to native vegetation sooner. That would have to come later on.
John?
Again, I go back to the hard yards. You know, to me, the simplest and cheapest way is just shut the tracks in the minute. And until such time as we get under control. And if that's got to be done, then that's a saving. Secondly, your numbers up there, Josh, they cost at 130,000 as opposed to, is there an income stream there from the trees, or is that the cost of actually doing what you're proposing?
It's shown as expense there, so it would be expense. The cost to undertake, so some of that would be offset by the income, but obviously there's an expenditure before we receive an income. So we'd net about a $36,000 profit from the one section that we do need to harvest, but it would be an approximate $18,000-$20,000 cost there. So I'd suggest that $30,000 is probably the initial cost before we then receive the benefit from the income. But then the remainder of it would be the $100,000 to retire that area 4 into native vegetation over time.
So again, as Tim stated, do we have to do it right now? Because the log price goes up and down, so, you know, the plant is an asset, so we probably should try and realise the value as an asset.
Yep, we can push that zone out another year, potentially another 2, much longer than that, and we probably end up with some more complicated harvesting processes.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Just on the regenerative aspects with the natives, rather than looking to rates, could we look at using the biodiversity fund?
I'm not sure if you.
Can only spend
It's
the
up to us.
biodiversity fund once. How you choose to spend it's up to you.
Should go and get interviews. Sorry, Josh, you mentioned before you might be able to get some emissions trading scheme credits. There's none associated with either of those blocks now.
If we're not replanting it though, any credits will be used up.
Yeah, that's my question. If you're not replanting it, you're going to have to pay to give the credits back too.
Yes.
But also,
So-
leading on from Councillor Holden's question, you could potentially fund the native regeneration through applying for NZUs.
Sounds like a plan. Jim.
Can I just ask the dumb question, that the potential damage to our water storage is going to be caused by putting heavy machinery in to remove the trees, is that correct?
Yes, yep, and removal of ground coverage, increasing flow rates for when it does rain, all the water sheeting off the land that was previously covered by forestry. Yeah, our cut-off drains aren't of sufficient size at the moment to be able to cope with the additional volumes as they hit at peak times.
So it would actually be an ideal site to do some eco-forestry and remove the logs by using heavy horses and chain them out without doing the land disturbance.
Conflict of interest there. Is that enough feedback for you? Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, and next we go back to Jo to talk about her penguins.
It's me again. Okay, so in relation to the penguin colony, the request was to replace the roofing on the administration building. It's been assessed by the facilities department as being required. So it will need to progress. The cost is approximately 176k is my understanding. And as it's required, Claire has looked into alternatives for it.
I have been in conversation with Philippa from the Penguin Colony, and happy to talk to you about that offline, but she wanted to keep this away from the public arena about other options.
Okay, I guess the question is, if this was to proceed as proposed there on that line, how would that be funded?
We believe that there's some thoughts on alternatives to actually council providing that funding up front, but we're looking into those alternatives now.
Okay. John.
Again, I would just say that's in the wrong column. It should be operational. It's part of an ongoing maintenance of a building that is actually producing income. So rather than having it come out as an income on the balance sheet, it should be coming out as a cost out of operational expenses.
If it is mainly principally R&M, but yeah, we'll leave that with you as feedback.
There is a grey line in between what is capital and OPEX, and given that we're trying to reduce rates, it's the major maintenance work, like where it's improving it to better than before, that becomes ticks over to capital. That's pretty well.
Okay, right. We'll look forward to seeing the plan. Tim, and then Jim.
Just
With respect to the Blue Penguin Colony, does the council own the buildings
Yes.
and they pay the council a lease for the
Yes.
operation? Okay, so the proposed approach here is entirely appropriate given the current structure of how everything is set up, but may change in the future depending on the ownership, or would council continue to own the buildings going forward?
I guess, so, you know, there would have been depreciation, you know, if you're a normal business landlord, you'd be claiming depreciation over time, not necessarily putting it aside. For us, it's really around, have we been putting aside depreciation for the replacement part of it, not the improvement part? So what think I'm hearing is that no, we haven't, well, not specifically for that building, but happy for officers to elucidate a bit further.
We're just trying to work out who's going to answer the question for that one.
Someone up there.
Yeah. Look, I think you're right. It would depend on the final arrangement of, if something changes in relation to the Penguin Colony, it could have an impact on how it's funded and the nature of the relationship between the Penguin Colony and council. Just sort of dealing with situation as it is at the moment. And probably the replacement of the roof can't wait too much longer.
No, all good. Okay. So a bit more information to come to us on that. Right. Joe again, Joanne Clear once more on property 10-year program for sale of surplus property.
Okay, so in relation to the 10-year program of property sales, we had a list which went out in the long-term plan, and that is the list that Claire has been looking at.
Yes, we have been looking at the list that's been put through to the LTP. Now, there's about 26 properties, I believe. One of the first things we would need to do is get a report to council for a resolution to ratify what's been put through to the LTP. Then we could progress based on, there's 3 sort of categories that we've got these properties in. There's the ground leases residential, there's the vacant land, and there's the land and building. So I would probably concentrate on the ones that are the easiest, the vacant land. We could probably put those out to market pretty quickly to test it, to see what we could get. And same with the commercial land and building. I would note, no, 24 Thames is on the list, but I believe there's been money put into the LTP. I'm not sure if it's next year or the year before, year after, to investigate corporate use of that said building. So that may have to be just put to the side for the moment. In terms of the ground leases, we would probably put together a letter to go out to the incumbent leaseholders and to see if they wanted to freehold that land and go from there basically. And so I would say within 12 months, we could probably get at least half a dozen properties potentially sold. At least, maybe more, depending on the interest.
Thank you. Sure.
Just a question round. I thought the properties that were in the consultation document were indicative of the sorts of properties that we could sell. If that's not the case, does that mean that we have to go back out into consultation on the others, or do we simply say that that was an indication of the tides and these others have been identified and we can sell them accordingly?
Around July, August last year, we did a full review of the portfolio, the whole portfolio that I have, and the 26 properties were identified at the time as the ones that were, I guess, the easiest, one with less legislative fish hooks, so we could hit the ground running, basically, once we'd got a resolution in place. There is a lot more properties we can definitely investigate, but they will take a bit more time and potentially a little bit more money to do. So nothing's off the table. These are the ones that were the easiest on the table.
Thank you. Any other comments? Was the Elm Street property on the list? I can't remember. Elm Street, the house we own. Is it still on the list?
It is on the list, but it can be put aside with 24 Thames for now.
Well, it's, yeah, we bought it for a strategic purpose, which was for community housing. And whilst we haven't been able to actually do anything because the government won't give us any support to do that, it's strategically important there because of the neighbours onto St Luke's cottages and so forth. There is also a project to put another house on that land, I think, which is a separate issue, but I think we're actually better off just to go and buy a house off the market than what that project actually is sitting there to spend.
We can certainly keep it with us until the housing review is complete.
Any other comments? Okay. Right, we are nicely ahead of time, I think. So
Just in terms of that one, in terms of the long-term plan, we'll grab that list and spread it out over the 10 years. Like, so she's mentioned there might be half a dozen that could put on the market in the next 12 months. So we'll look at whatever value that we'll put on them as the worst case scenario income stream that we could get. And that will be put in as income in our 10-year budgets. So that helps reduce the rates requirement as well.
yeah, I'm just aware of the overhead issue and be good to get an understanding of how that's calculated into whatever the total revenue might be. So we have a very clear expectation of what the net result will be. Nothing else there. We will move. So just we'll do the Beach Road one. And mindful that Paul has a number of things to do. No, he's got something else to do at 3 o'clock. So we may, if we do Beach Road now, we'll get on to other topics that Paul has following that. Jim?
Sorry, just one last question on property. Would it be prudent in a business sense to be putting budgeting our lowest expectation of the property and signalling to the market that that's what we think, or should we be trying to extract the highest value out of stuff?
I would expect that the number in the LTP will simply be a total for that year. It won't describe what property or properties make up that total.
We've already put the GB out in the consultation document for every individual property. So that I'm just saying that's the value that we'll use. That's on record. It's public record of how much the quotable value is right now anyway. So it is what it is.
Which is outdated already. Okay, Beach Road. Mark, you all right to do that now? Yep. Thank you, Claire.
So following on from submissions to Beach Road, we revisited some of the items that were raised by some of the submissions, alternate access routes, and also other aspects that weren't covered off in the actual estimations that were provided. So we've spent some time going around working out, putting together over a 50-year band, which was some of the original proposals were for the options for Beach Road. So basically we've got the road asset from the golf course to, say, the Armara Creek Bridge is $1,034,000. And so, and the maintenance costs since 2009 to 2024 total 27,000. That does not include the rock armor. The rock armor that's been placed there is 286,000, and that is an asset that we are required to maintain under our consent conditions. So if we choose to close all of Beach Road, it is estimated that we actually still do have maintenance to carry out over the 50-year period. So there's culverts there that require maintained or remove them, and so there's an estimation there for that. We still have a bridge there that needs inspected and maintained under its normal cycles, but also there's a potential if the road's closed that we remove that. We have water services to Kakanui out there, and that is within the inundation, coastal inundation line of 50 years, so they will require relocation. The wastewater services are also in line with the water services and will also require relocation. The existing rock protection would need to be removed if we chose not to maintain it, because our global consent requires us to do that. We just can't abandon it. We then also have to consider the effect on alternate routes. So Stonewall and Thousand Acre Roads proposed will require widening so that it can take the increased use of traffic to make that safe as well. And so the ongoing maintenance and improvements of full closure estimated over 50 years is 6.23 million. If there's some of the submissions we suggested using the north section or maybe the whole section of the road closure as alternate use, so being either walking, cycling, or other uses, that still comes with the ongoing maintenance price tag, plus whatever the cost is to actually put in place that those particular facilities. So that we believe that over 50 years, it would actually increase by $1 million. You still have to move your water services and all the rest of it, and it would be a managed retreat. So eventually those facilities wouldn't be available if you just allowed the coast to continue eroding. If we chose to just have the south section of Armara remain open, so that's the section that loops from Armara Road back to Gardeners Road and keeps a connection to that reserve area, beach access, the heritage site, Old Bones Backpackers and a few others. There's still the maintenance of the closed section that has to be considered. We would still have to consider relocation of the services in the closed section, and we would still have to consider doing the widening of Thousand Acre and Stonewall Roads. So that has a price tag of 7.71 million estimate over the 50 years. If we choose to remain open full length, then the options are you could have single lane access through the areas that have been dug out, and as an alternative to reducing the service level on that road, you could put those in. You could consider putting those in the 2026-27 period by not borrowing money, but borrowing from our infrastructure team, a local share allocated to the roading improvements budget, which hasn't been approved by the government, but the local share was in there, and it's 375 in both years. So that would actually give you enough funds to actually do those road improvements and keep the road open. Going on from that, though, there would be we would need to consider putting funding aside to do rock protection as it's required along that road, or do a full rock protection and turf matting as recommended by the Becker report, coastal report from 2023. And so that would actually, over 50 years, is 4.67 million, or you do your 600,000 worth of get the road open with the money that's sitting in the road and minor improvements budget in the next financial year.
A lot of numbers there, and a bit hard to assimilate all of them, and get an understanding of them. So yeah, whether we can, if we can see them now, that's great. But certainly this might be a topic that we don't necessarily give you full direction on today, but I'll go to first of all Tim and then John.
I was just going to endorse what you just said, Mia. Mr. Wilson, I can see there's been a whole heap of work going on with like heaps of detail, but I can't possibly give a steer based on, you know, just listening to the information. I kind of need it packaged together so I can kind of just engage with it a bit better.
Thank you, John.
Again, Mark, congratulations on all the work that has been done. The practical side of me says, let's just cut our losses and get out of it. And where I'm coming from with that, if you look towards the Kakanui end, that is eroding away quite quickly right now. The money we throw into doing what's already been done, if you work on the theory that there's 0.6 metres a year is being lost off this coastline, especially out here at the north end of town, that's 30 metres that's going to get chewed up in 50 years' time, which will go right through the other side of that road. We may have to shift that water infrastructure at some stage anyway, and that's just part and parcel, that's the way it is. But would we be better funding that total expenditure on 1,000 Acre Road and those roads? Because we're losing probably, I don't know how long that road is, 4 metres, 4 Ks or 5 Ks down there. We can actually put that funding into making that other part of the infrastructure. And the basis of where I'm coming from, at the bulk of it, is that we have State Highway 1, which can, in times of flooding and everything else, cut us off from this area, and that we need a second route to get through there. Otherwise, our only other routes are the Lindis Pass or the Dances Pass. So I think, again, cut our losses.
Okay. So officers happy to put this into review room so that we got the opportunity to absorb it a bit more and put comments in there. Okay.
Mr. Wilson, was there any assessment, because I see the officer comments regarding Mr. Plunkett's submission, but there was kind of further questions around, you know, the principle of not just gravel and where the road is in place, but actually shifting the road inland through, you know, procurement of neighbouring farmland, and probably trying to get that to line up somewhere with the infrastructure that's naturally going to be there anyway. So was there any kind of analysis done of that stuff as requested?
Our analysis didn't include doing a road shift.
So what would a ballpark estimate of how many kilometres is the road? Sorry,
it's roughly 2.2.
So 2.5 kilometres. What you might have to procure like 3 or 4 hectares, something like that, as a strip down the side, and then you could presumably use some of the existing road base to relocate across. What would a ballpark estimate be per 100 metres or per metre or whatever rate you kind of work with?
Due to the topography and the way that area is, it'd be a bit hard to put a figure on it at this moment. There'd be quite a lot of excavation required because of the slope of the land to get it shaped to enable you to put a road in and the associated. Plus, you'd also need an idea of what sort of drainage and other facilities you're going to require to put in when you realign, put it on a new alignment.
Jim.
At this point, I'll choose to disagree with my friend from Corridale. My in-head computations with what you put in front of us, Mark, there is actually not a financial advantage, but there is a similarity in maintaining the road as to actually exploring alternative routes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We'll get that info and we'll get some feedback in the next day and a half. Okay, next we've got Paul speaking to the tennis request. Hand over to you, Paul.
Not really speaking to it too much. It's just to remind councillors of the submission from North Otago Tennis was for a between 50% or 85% contribution to the $2.8 million redevelopment or development of covered hard courts in the Oamaru Gardens. I suppose the officer advice would be to we're not really in a position to consider this at the moment, but this is very much an item for the elected members to discuss.
Brent.
I agree with the officer's advice on that one. It's a large sum. It's something that we can't really afford right now. It's a large amount of money for a small benefit of our community. We have to look after all of the community right now. And I would be hard pressed to be able to feel that that would be justifiable in the current times.
Okay, any other thoughts? John?
Yes, I totally agree with Councillor Cowell's sentiments.
Okay.
What was there any feedback on just leaving it as a zero line item? So that, oh, sorry, okay, I've missed the memo there, thanks. Cheers.
Yeah. I think it's something that needs a bit of, potentially could be developed over time. So that's something we need to work on separately. Okay, Paul, while you are there, if we can talk about the next up Civic Trust.
Yeah, so just to remind the nature of the submission, first one was to convert the existing loans into grants. So that's there's a $500,000 grant plus some heritage grants, heritage loans. The next aspect was to transfer the reed sheds to the trust, and the third was a request for 200,000 of funding. I'm reading it quickly, to develop asset management plans for all of the buildings owned by the trust. I think the office comment on this is, I think we need to establish exactly what kind of relationship council wants to have with the trust. It hasn't been that well discussed or that well established, and I think this kind of funding would need to be very clear from both parties about what the expectations in terms of the expectations of both parties in terms of what was being delivered at the community benefit. The trust has produced the document that did show a strong community benefit of the collection of buildings, but it's really, I think we'd want to get the relationship agreement in place first before we made this kind of very significant financial commitment to the organisation. So I think, again, a bit like the other one, it's like something to keep working on. It's quite a significant request from this organisation.
I think to determine the relationship, we need to go back to actually the start of the relationship, which was very much a partnership one between council and Pacific Trust, and it's getting an understanding of I guess that history and how that started, and I guess the expectations which have been legacies of that particular start, versus how we want to take the relationship forward. They do an important job of looking after heritage. I would like to know what we spend on our heritage buildings that ratepayer stumps up for, because we know that's not going to be any sort of cheap cost. And equally, we're expecting them to do that, and also run it as a commercial tenancy business, but also have a whole visitor experience along with that, which is not always as compatible as we might think. So it is getting an understanding of what the relationship is that we want to have, and for me, I do feel an obligation to that past relationship. I do think I like John McCone's comments previously around giving them the Heritage Fund, or half the Heritage Fund, or whatever it was, John. I think, it is money being spent on heritage at a time when things are tough. We can still keep spending it on that, but we can help the one that's right, the people that are right in front of us. Happy for feedback. Wahimo Jim.
I would endorse and support your comments around the Heritage Fund being used in a public space as against where it's currently being spent in a private space. But I would definitely, in a voting situation, be voting against any further funding going to the trust until we had established a more understanding or understandable business relationship, because I'm not opposed, let me put on the record, I'm not opposed to the work that the trust is doing. They're doing have done a magnificent job, but there needs to be a very sharp business focus brought to that space to ensure that the heritage is protected.
Tim.
Yeah, I think the request for the 200,000 contribution towards the asset management plan for the 16 buildings is which, when you break it down onto a per building basis, it's not unreasonable. I think that the thinking from the trust behind that is that there's a tranche of reserves currently sitting on the trust balance sheet, which ideally, when the asset management plans which inform the need for further investment in the building become ready, the trust has the available funds sitting there to put forward as a contribution for co-funding any projects that are seeking from outside funding streams. So I guess the consequence of not, because the reality is that's a step that needs to be taken for anything to progress in that space. So the consequence of not supporting that is that the trust will then need to spend a significant number of years, probably a decade or perhaps more, accumulating funds to get to the stage where they can then contribute, the 35% towards to any project that they might undertake. So I guess I just want to flag that with others. But regarding the red sheds, I guess I just want to flag that this is kind of presented here in a OWCT approaching council kind of manner, but my understanding, from wearing my OWCT hat is it's been a bit of a two-way conversation. So, yeah, I mean, it's, if it's not something the council's interested in, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn on behalf of the OWCT, then they'll just leave it. It's not, yeah, the trust's understanding was that there was a conversation wanting to be had on that. So, yeah, and I just, just to take Councillor Thompson's task a wee bit over needing a bit more of a commercial lens. Well, the report that we received, as a result of the program of work that this council kindly funded for the Civic Trust was it outlined that against the value of the property, there was a good return on investment. There's definitely scope for further work, but it's not entirely way off the mark.
Thank you, John.
Just for my own clarification, totally clear that the Civic Trust is all voluntary and the council owns the buildings, is that correct? The ground and the lands?
The trust owns the buildings, the land underneath them is all Harbour Board endowment land, which the council owns. And makes a pretty good rental off, to be fair. I didn't comment on the red sheds. It's certainly been a two-way discussion in the past around the trust taking them on, and we have gone ahead and renovated them, refurbished them, which is great. But equally, I don't know that the use of our property team's time to find tenants and to oversee that is overly beneficial. I think they will get, well, they've only ever been a fairly peppercorn rental. They were costing us a lot of money for a long time because we were paying the power bill and for the $100 a year rental we were getting for one of them. And that was a bit prohibitive. So, to my mind, I think the ability to have the trust look after them and look after the landlord relationship and so forth would be a beneficial one, which allows our team to actually focus on some of the big things that they should be focusing on and we want them to focus on, and endeavour to actually increase overall income. So that would be my view on that. I think they've got the capability and I'd be quite happy to let them get on and do that, and I think they would do a good job. Again, happy for feedback.
Yes, I think in terms of pulling together the long-term plan, it's going to be a longer-term discussion and work to be had between the property department, and those conversations will continue. Can we get direction in terms of the three numbers options, the converting the loan to a grant? The 200K asset management plan is budgeted for the 26th financial year, and then allocating 25K per year for the next 5 years as well.
I think if there's agreement around the Heritage Fund, then they can use that for a mix of those things. They can repay the loan with it. They could be using it for some of the funding. I think the 200,000 maintenance plan basically it's a big ask for us and our ratepayers, but again, they don't necessarily need to do the whole job at once. They know they've got a whole lot of roofs to do sooner rather than later, but that's for them to develop a plan. Tim, what's your thoughts? And then Jeremy.
My personal view is if we were going to fund just one of those items, would be that we at least make a significant nudge towards the asset management plan line, because that will allow the trust to progress in the direction that this council was asking it to progress. So I think by not at least aiding in that space, we're kind of, it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I don't think we can, it's not reasonable to say yes to all of these.
Jeremy?
I kind of agree that it needs to be more of a longer term discussion first before we agree to any of them. I don't know how we do that in this process for long-term plan, but I'd like to, I mean, even the Heritage Fund on the fly, there's other buildings around the district that are equally competitive for the heritage aspects, so I wouldn't see it going straight all to there, but I don't know how we have that conversation a bit more longer term out of this process, so maybe on to the next step.
Yeah, I guess for some of us, it's been a long-term discussion already, and so that's where, you know, where I'm coming from, I guess, when I make the statements I have. But we can talk a bit more about it and make some decisions in May. Jim?
Can I ask a question of councillor Percival? Whether he could give us any feedback with his observations of having joined the trust?
No.
Well, I can't ask, or you've got no opinion.
Asked and answered. You're becoming argumentative, councillor. Okay, right. So we'll try and firm up something before you need to get the figures all signed off. Right, Paul, if we can go to Wayland Lodge next.
Good to have one that can have an opinion on. And I think it was very clear when council made the decision to make an additional loan to Wayland Lodge Trust, that it was a loan. That was in all the decision papers. It was what was agreed with the trust. And I don't believe anything has been presented that is compelling enough for council to change its position to making that a grant. Councillor Cowles may wish to comment on Wayland Lodge, but they're not going backwards. We're using the rate to service the interest on the loan at the moment, so it's sort of status quo, and it can sit there. It's not getting any bigger. It's I think really until there's better certainty and clarity about in relation to the operation of the facility now that has been fully developed, and we've just been told that it is now fully occupied. Like, there's no rush or no compelling reason to change council's position. So.
Great.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I'd support your view on this. There's a reasonable amount of work going on in the background around getting a business plan brought forward. They do now have all beds full, which certainly helps the financial position. They were waiting to get some code of compliance from the renovations signed off, which became a large focus last month, and we got that done. And now it's all beds are currently full, which is great news. And there's some waiting demand there as well. So I think there's some more work to be done, but I agree with Paul. It was signed as a loan. We're not going backwards. It's being serviced by, or the interest at least is being serviced, and I think we need some time to move forward now from the operational space to see what Wayland Lodge come back with for their plan in the future, which they are working hard on at the moment.
Yep, everyone's happy. Okay, thank you. Paul, your next one. Living wage.
Peter might want to if he had a microphone chirping on this one as well. But no, I mean, again, it's a irregular submission. The implications are wider than suggested by the submitter. And Peter looks keen to go, so I'll flick it over to him.
Hopefully that microphone's going, is it? Yep.
I hope so. Just on this, we're currently withholding information on Goimas on this because we are in collective bargaining. So it is sensitive and subject to the outcome of that collective bargaining. As we discussed this morning, we've talked about what the budget might look like for salary increases at council, and this would form part of our decision making. The living wage is currently 27.80 an hour, and it increases to 28.95 per hour from September onwards. So that will factor into our thinking around remuneration, but we're limited in what we can discuss around numbers of impacted staff, quantums, because we are in collective bargaining and it is sensitive information.
Thank you, Peter. One or two councillors might not be earning that. Any comments? I'm not saying they're worth it, by the way. No feedback?
We can't provide feedback. That's the information we've been provided, so.
Yeah. Okay. We'll have to leave it maybe for a more offline discussion. Okay, Paul, you're down for one other one, which was the Unitary Council. So are you able to speak on that one now?
I can speak on, I think, the issue that Councillor Blakely raised, which was, I think, trying to sort of have some kind of discussion when we were talking about what the water, the local water's done well, whether we could at least raise this topic or start some discussion about it. So the view is that the local water done well is complicated enough. We're really, struggling to make it simple enough to get it out into a meaningful consultation document, and I think this would, but it would add a further level of confusion, and there's no concrete proposal. I think, yes, as people understand, it is likely to have an impact on the organisation of local government, but I think it is very. We found it really difficult to try and include that kind of discussion in the consultation material, which is already quite bulky. So, sorry, I haven't probably been able to progress it in a way that meets sort of your needs, but I think it's, perhaps it's something we can talk about in some of the conversations we have with the community rather than in the formal consultation document. Sorry.
Thanks, Paul. I think it is a difficult one. We've got a small part of our community that's been working on this, but as much as they've had conversations, I don't know that there's been any great uprising, the desire for a unitary. I personally can understand the reasoning for having one and for why we might go to there, not the least the reduction in levels of government in New Zealand. But on the other hand, it needs to be something that the community wants. And for now, we are representing the Waitaki district. So it'd be good if there was, a greater movement in support of a unitary that actually came to us and said, yeah, we all want this. We want you to work on it. But there's not. And so, when we've got all these other pressures on us, I think do we choose to do something we might actually be in agreement with, but actually our community isn't, because go back to the local government, what do they call themselves? Commission, local government commission. They've made attempts to do a number of amalgamations and the like, and each time they've been beaten back by community saying, no, we want to keep our own identity and we don't want to join with our neighbouring councils. So Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa, Far North, I think it's been similar discussions. Yeah. So have you got any thoughts on it as to is this something that we should be including in the long-term plan? Tim?
I take your point, Mr. Hope, and thanks for providing some feedback on it. And I agree that it adds further complexity, but then at the same time, in my mind at least anyway, I'm asking the question, well, if we go through this water reform process and end up deciding to go with a joint CCO option, or at least at very least carving water out of council, which, you know, based on the financials, looks like it possibly needs to be the course of action that we take. The question becomes what becomes of local councils and local government at that point. And so yeah, I just feel it's very much interconnected with the decision we make around water, because if it's inevitable that there is to be change in local government, like residual local government in the long term, then does that, with whatever shape that may take, does that kind of somehow inform the direction we should take with water? So it becomes like a circular kind of conversation. But you know, that's and I guess Mr. Douglas's submission was kind of from a little bit of a different tangent, but the two are very much interrelated.
Okay, we are well ahead of time. What we're going to do is have a bit of a break now, so that people can recaffeinate, etc. Because we had a very short break for lunch, we'll make it slightly longer. So it's 10 to 3 now. If we come back about 10 past 3, about 20 minutes, and that'd be very good. Okay, thanks very much. Welcome back, everyone. We'll get things underway with this long-term plan workshop. Reminder, we are live streaming, so welcome anyone who's watching on the live stream. We got through quite a number of pieces before afternoon tea, so we were getting ahead quite well. I'm not sure who we've got coming next. Is Brent coming? Oh, is it that Brent? That Brent. Okay. Councillor Cowles, that was you. I was thinking it was a builder Brent, but no. Talking about the Waitaki Valley Health Hub. And over to you.
Okay, so I originally was going to put this forward as a notice of motion. We thought it was appropriate to bring it here for the discussion. I don't know if everyone's had a quick read of it. In my mind, it ticks a few boxes. We're talking about using property to strengthen our communities and to look at property that we can divest from easily. I know that the piece of land that were originally spoken about in here, Councillor Hopkins gave me a hand to put this together, and I just feel it ticks a number of boxes. There's no doubt that health throughout our region, in particular up the valley, there's some real stresses on the health system. I want to make it really clear that this is the Waitaki Valley Health Hub. It is not the Kura practice as such, or the business. This is a trust sitting outside of that. It is wanting to provide some really good facilities to ensure that we maintain and hold on to the business that we do have leasing at the moment and in there, and the services that we can provide. So this Waitaki Valley Health Hub will provide additional services. It'll have rooms for we can do overnight observation. It'll have rooms where hearing and sight clinics can come through, and external clinics can come and provide better services, which is something that was identified through looking at our health services throughout the region. So I've thought, well, since there wasn't much of an appetite to fund it directly, that perhaps we could look at some of the other strategies that we're using, such as divesting some of our properties and ensuring it's going directly back into our community, which really has little impact on rates. So I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Thanks, Brent. Yeah, I don't think there was. Yeah, I think it was a challenge at the time because it was relatively short notice, and there wasn't a lack of support overall to fund it. Just we needed some time to work on how we fund it, and obviously we've been able to have some conversations around the potential property sales and so on, which has been really good. Some of them will take a wee while to realise, but that doesn't stop us if we have confidence in that. Coming to an agreement about an allocation that we could, I guess, put forward as a contribution to them. Councillor Thompson, did you?
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. I'd just like to congratulate Mr. Cowles on finding a practical solution to a practical problem rather than an academic one. And I would totally support what you're proposing.
Yeah, I think the best similarity we've got with this one is the East Otago Medical Centre that was in Palmerston, and we were able to find $100,000 towards that. It was only a relatively smaller amount, do you remember, Jim? 1.3 million or something at the time. This is obviously affected by inflation on this one, but also it's quite a slightly grander scale. So really looking, is there support generally for taking this approach to giving a commitment towards funding for them? John?
I'd just like to endorse what Jim said. I congratulate on the approach that's been taken. And to me, the land that we're talking about was railway reserve, which actually belongs to that part of the district. And I wouldn't mind betting that it probably costs us more than it does to run it from a financial point of view at the minute, and it's going for a good community use, and I think we should pursue it.
Welcome, Jim Hopkins.
Thank you.
Anyway, so just for those who have been watching, Jim is back in the chamber.
For better or worse. It's a very comprehensive report. And as you rightly pointed out, there are precedents. I suppose the one sort of knot that we might need to untease is the question of the actual, whether it's a ward asset or whether it's a district asset. The East Otago Medical Centre, I think there was a power company in that particular area. The original Borough or County Council had some shares which were specific and particular to them. So there was no sense that anyone else had any claim to that asset. But I do think we need to resolve that very relatively minor matter. The other thing I would be interested in our staff letting us know and letting the community know is what they think might be the potential, or maybe it might be commercially sensitive, but we've talked about identifying two different pieces of land, and it would be perhaps rather than what we think we might get, it might be useful to have somebody advise how much of the railway reserve land they feel should be included if it is to be sold for sale. But I just think I don't have a view on whether the assets sit with the ward or the district, but I do think that it's something that we need to unbundle as part of proceeding with this.
Hannah.
Yeah, thank you. I think I agree in principle with what we're trying to do because it's important. The other thing I'm thinking about is in the event of an emergency, like how we can equip that, like to act as, like a coordination hub of some sort with regional council and here. So I'm just thinking around strategic partnerships, like to leverage. And then I'm also thinking around how to protect it if, like down the track and it needed to be sold and what happens to that. So I think it's just around protection of the, asset long term and what are the opportunities for strategic partnerships in the event of that we could utilize, make them and that kind of support. And the weekend there was a power outage, you know what I mean? Like, so then, things like that, if it was longer, how can we maximize the relationships of different GP clinics across the whole district to help support each other? Thank you.
Just in relation to a little bit of that, Hannah, as well, part of the thinking of why they chose the site they did is it's directly opposite the hall. And exactly that, in case of emergencies, that, there is a bit of a hub there of community centre. And so that was one of the thoughts along when they were planning that. But again, I'd just like to thank Jim for assisting me here and putting this together for the community.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to get into too much detail. There were a number of. I think we need to be careful about saying that assets from community have to be used there, because there are times where that isn't the case, and we need to be mindful of that. And I think the other thing is that the retirement village was mentioned there. The retirement village is going to be delivering between $1 and $2 million a year profits to the benefit of the health community. So again, this won't be doing that. It's playing an important role. I'm not, downplaying that part of it at all. It's really a critical facility for the community there and for really the whole ward. And indeed over into Hakataramia, into the Waimate district as well. So very supportive of it. If everyone's generally in support, I guess from officers, is there any questions that you've got around or comments that you've got around the realising some of those property assets or parks assets, maybe?
Yeah, thanks for excuse me. I would just say probably we need to do a bit of investigation with the property team just to make sure that these are pieces of land that don't carry debt, because obviously if they do, we certainly don't want to have to pay down debt and then there'd be a very small amount available for the health purposes. So just really to investigate the land, but more than happy to progress that. I've got the key questions that were asked as well.
Thank you very much. I'm pretty confident the railway land won't, and neither will the other triangle of land. I don't think we've done anything on that which would incur any debt on it, but you need to go through that process. Okay, if that's everything there, thanks very much, Brent, for putting that forward. Very helpful. We'll go to Roger next. We've got the Citizens Awards free parking. Now, the suggestion is that this in itself is negligible cost. It's, you know, potentially we can do it. The other part of the conversation though really is looking to the Grants and Awards Subcommittee to come up with any ideas that they've got around how they might want to recognise Citizens Award recipients. And in addition to this, because it's a very Oamaru centric benefit, which will benefit some recipients from elsewhere in the district, but you know, it benefits those who live here more because they'll be shopping here, etc. So looking at a package would be helpful. Roger, do you want to add anything to that?
Oh, you must have been looking at my notes whilst I was at tea.
Yeah, I was.
As I say, I mean, it's, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to introduce this one, so thank you very much, Chair. I mean, it's really down to sort of a value and a cost, and I mean, these are hugely valuable members of the community that put that get them. Typically 10 to 12 a year, I believe, get awarded them. The only way I could put any cost to it would be to say that, you know, we're issuing the equivalent of a parking permit, and the parking permits are valued at $600 a year. So that's between 6,000 and 7,000, and it's really only valuable to those that live in Oamaru. And whether you know, an honours board in the museum would be a good way to recognise them or not, I don't know, but that's what I reckon, you know, it'd have to be costed at.
Yeah, parking permits are normally purchased by people who are parking every day throughout the week, and there wouldn't be too many recipients that would be doing that. So that's why I'm saying it's a negligible cost, I believe, as long as the proviso is that the recipient themselves is in the car whenever they park. Would be a fairly key part to that. Is everyone happy for the Grants and Awards Subcommittee to look into it a bit further? Yep. Okay. We'll talk about the aviary, the public gardens.
This was one I was hoping you were going to speak to. Because I tend to bring things that divide the community, and this is probably one of them. Some people love the aviaries, and some people think it's time that they've done their dash. They cost about 17,000 a year to maintain. In I think 27-28 year, there is budget for demolition of the aviaries. It's really a case of whether council wishes to bring that forward and save the 17,000 a year, or whether they wish to keep spending that until the fund comes available in 2 to 3 years' time. There will be a process that we'll need to go through to relocate the birds that are existing. But there again, it's over to yourselves.
Brent.
I tend to agree. In my opinion, I feel, you know, birds in a habitat like that, it's probably done its day. I think Councillor Thompson's got room on his place for the habitat down there. I vote we move them down there.
There's quite a few different types of birds are in the Aotematara wetlands. I think a few more colourful ones could be added in there. John.
Well, just out of curiosity, what's the $17,000 annual cost? Where does that go?
Birdseed. We'll cover the maintenance, somebody to check the birds are alive each day, somebody to feed them, water them, clean them out, push fresh bits of twig in here and there, and make sure they haven't been vandalised and things like that. If you're interested in the contract, then please let me know.
Jim?
I was interested this year that I think there were a number of submissions to the long-term plan on this, on the future of the aviary. And it seemed to be a complete switch from a view that was expressed some years ago, when I think one school in particular essentially campaigned to keep the aviary open. And in 2025, all the submissions said it's inhumane, not fair to the birds themselves. It's a substandard facility, and I believe that it is. It's not what one would establish as an aviary if you were building it today. And I think there is an element of cruelty in keeping those birds there, even though they're probably acclimatized. So my view is, in this instance, I think the community's come to a view that changing sort of attitudes and changing standards of animal welfare would warrant us closing it. I'd agree with Councillor Hopkins' sentiment. I believe that we have two choices. One is upgrade and modernise the facility so that it's acceptable, which we could easily bury $500,000 in. Or we say this is no longer fit for purpose, it is humane, we rehome the birds and have the aviary removed.
Yeah, and just speaking in support of that, I know there will be people who look forward to going to the gardens and going and seeing Jimmy and saying hello to him and have him answer back and all those sorts of things. And yeah, the delight that little kids take in going and seeing the birds. But I do agree, it's past its use by date as far as the facility goes, and we either do it properly or we get rid of it, and we just can't afford to be doing it properly, I believe. So I think that probably gives you sufficient feedback from around the table. Roger.
So just to clarify, we'll be bringing the closure forward for the 27-28 year?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm seeing nods. Yeah. Thank you. Right, moving next to parking strategy. You again, Roger.
Oh, yes, well, we have already talked about this on a few occasions now, and it will be culminating in a paper coming to council, which will look at the option to lease the replacement parking machines. It will provide you with options to decide on whether you extend the coverage of paid parking and whether you retain or stop the 1 hour free parking, and that will be brought to you in the council paper for you to decide at a future date. I think it is the May meeting.
Comments? None? Thank you. One last one from Josh. What a good one to finish on.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, we have got one more after this one, Josh. So you're not finishing with toilets. So carry on.
It's a shame. It is a scintillating topic. So at the moment, council has a toilet strategy that's set in 2018, which kind of covered a 10-year forecasted investment in our public toilets. That had a look at some of the service levels as well as some sites where it was desirable to invest in further infrastructure or potentially prioritise. Amanda, do you have the budget? Yeah, thank you. We're at a stage within the implementation of the toilet strategy where we probably need to do a bit of a stock take and have a look at what we want to do for the longer term moving forward. This financial year, we're looking to undertake a land review of our Parks and Reserves holdings, as well as review our reserves management plan, which essentially sets the service levels within our reserves. It would make sense for us to look at our investment in public toilets moving forward in conjunction with those two items, so that we can look at potentially making some cost savings, or reducing some of the services in some places where it might be superfluous because of the number of facilities that we do have. Within the strategy itself, we do try to have at least one facility within each major township. But this is why, as you'll see there, we've got no funding in the next 2 financial years, but then funding in that 3rd year out. So that gives us some time to look at what we want to be doing in the longer term, and then make an investment plan from there.
It's not,
Just put the microphone on. Thanks.
sorry, it's not toilet related, but at the very top there in red, I saw that Otago stormwater plan or strategy.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that right now.
Okay.
We can't be putting our toilet waste into the Otago stormwater.
All I was going to ask was, why isn't that being done by the ORC at their expense, not ours?
They don't do stormwater. No, let's focus on toilets. Yeah, yeah. John.
Can that number be pushed into 28, 29? And where I'm coming from, that we've got 3 major projects on the books that may not be finished by then. We hope the event centre will be, but the Forester Gallery has started, and so is the bridge. And just to add that in there, and it's, we already have those facilities in place. Do we need to have a Rolls-Royce system that's costing the ratepayer that much more all the time, as opposed to doing it strategically as we can afford it?
In reply, I'd suggest that yes, we could potentially move it out. The reason that it was put in for 27, 28 was to allow us to do that service level review, essentially, of our public toilets. And then in 26, 27, we'll be undertaking another long-term plan. So essentially the next council would then be able to choose what it wants to do moving forward off the back of its strategy that it's put together in terms of public toilets. So whilst we could move it forward as a placeholder, the next council could then choose to bring it back. Yeah, so it was left there so that it was a decision for the next financial year following the long-term plan.
Sorry, the 400,000 was for a review.
No, sorry, the $400,000 would be for the next significant investment in a public toilet facility.
So essentially we're saying we're not planning to do any new toilets for the next 2 years. Which I've got to say, we have built quite a lot over the last 15 years.
So just a question, if we are going to do a review prior to that 400,000 budget allocation, and presumably that review will inform the next LTP, as you say, shouldn't there be a budget allocation for the review?
We'll undertake the review internally, so it'll be part of our operational costs rather than necessarily having a separate project there which we require additional funding for.
Just to remind everyone, the reason the toilet conversation came up, these were the 5 specific submissions we had about requests for new toilet blocks in the next few years.
Okay.
Yeah, this.
So Hamden Beach Reserve, the skate park in Palmerston, the Lookout gun placements up on the Cape, Palmerston Sports Ground, and Kakinui Northside Public Toilet.
Yeah, so some are new, some are refurbishments. So I think, yeah, it is timely, just looking through the strategy and what was proposed to be done in there. We've ticked off a lot of those. And I don't think it's as much as there's a lot of demand, you could add a whole bunch of ones around Alps to Ocean and other facility, amenities. It's probably time to just pause that and actually go back and do look at where, what's the next strategy look like, come up with a priority list, which may need to change over time as well, but at least get an understanding of all of the different areas where toilets could go and then prioritise them according to most need. Yes, you need to go.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I was just going to clarify, this is only a workshop and not a meeting, so we don't need to pass a motion on this issue.
Thank you for that. Okay, any more puns? Councillor Hopkins, you're usually good for one or two. Okay. We will now go to the investment in tourism. So we had a number of different projects which added up to a bit shy of $1 million, and we asked officers to come back with what does it look like if we cut that in half, as in what priorities might there be. So on the screen we've got that. Thank you, Joe. We'll speak to that.
Okay, so initially we went through the project list as an executive leadership team and looking at the amounts. The conversation that I've had with Mel and her team is around what could specifically be done with that. Now, the direction that they've given me is that if the decision is to cut it in half, the decision is to cut it in half and they'll achieve what they can. But probably the focus would be on the funds, excuse me, that are listed for the Geopark, which is 200k. They've already received 125 this year, and the visitors centre of 120k. So that adds up to 320. Excuse me. But they would simply be reducing other funds, specifically on line 4090. I didn't write down what it was. Yeah, so their preference would be to keep the reduction to 320, but they realise that that may actually need to be cut in half and therefore higher. But we did discuss at exec, then it would be a case of actually saying to the team, this is how much money you've got. You need to kind of figure out what you can achieve to the best possible outcomes with those funds. There has been suggestions that the visitor centre could actually be serviced out of one of our other centres. Oamaru Opera House was one of those that was raised, but it could offer a burning platform for how we actually provide visitor services.
So what's proposed for the 390,000, or is that just not happening this year one?
Yeah, I don't have the list from Mel on specifically what it covers, but there's a lot of the Waitaki Story and the Gateway.
It's got its own budget
Work which is being done. So I can't answer that question as to the full list that's being.
Lines again.
Suggestion 6031 and 6033.
Question to somebody, Lisa, Joanne, whomsoever. I would have thought that the mayor's right, that Waitaki Identity and Storytelling still got 150. The Geopark Discovery Hub, not entirely clear what the 50,000 is for, but that's for Duntroon, I take it, is it? So have we committed, is that part of that package that we committed to some years back, or is that additional to that?
That should only be about 35 or 30,000.
It's not Duntroon.
No, it's
not.
It's not, okay.
That 50,000 is when they were looking at doing a discovery hub for the Geopark as part of the UNESCO requirement. They have instead looked at putting that into another facility, and Leslie, you might want to correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the proposal is to maybe look at putting that into the museum or the gallery to operate out of for a short term until they work out what that requirement is later from UNESCO's requirements.
Yeah.
I believe there's also the wayfinding that's in that fund. Is that correct?
Is this part of? We were told that accreditation or review and renewal of accreditation was something that the Geopark was required or had to do in 2026. And I'm assuming, therefore, that this is seen as some necessary prerequisite to take a persuasive case to UNESCO in 2026 for reaccreditation, because they appear to be the ones who are saying you must have a hub. Oh, and by the way, we're not giving you a red cent towards building it or running it, and the same from the New Zealand government, and the same from anyone else involved in this tourism around the country.
So I still don't know what the 390 is for and why that's so sacrosanct, when actually it seems to be that that was what we were paying Tourism Waitaki. They don't need that anymore because they've been using the penguin colony. And at the moment, we haven't got any proposal around the penguin colony money going to anything else. So I do wonder why we're not actually targeting that. Why are we getting driven to a couple of things which actually are part of developing the visitor economy, which is the visitor centre and the geopark?
Aren't they the ones they want cheap, 200 and 120?
They said that's what could be cut.
Yeah, so the two amounts, one for the visitor centre and one for the geopark, are the two that are being suggested as being cut. The geopark having received 125 already this year. Yeah.
Lisa?
Just from the conversation to back Jo up and what she's saying there around the 390, when we were looking at where we can, make some rather brutal and tough decisions around the funding that we require going forward, we identified a number of these sitting there and went, look, let's just pick the 390 or one of these amounts and say you just have to do what you can do within that budget, as opposed to all the different line items. So we effectively go back to that area and go, this is the money you've got to work with. We need to make it happen, as opposed to all the different line items. Is that what you recall as well, Jo?
Yeah, because the conversation started at the exec, of course, when we were going through what was reasonable for each department to actually have. So that was the information that I had passed on to Mel. I don't think we realised that we would be drilling down line by line, but Mel's suggestion is that we look at those two lines of funding because there is alternatives.
So the starting point was these submissions. So the Geopark makes an annual submission and they've requested, the most recent request was 200K for the 3 years, 26, 27, 28. And also the Information Centre has requested that we carry on their funding at 120K for 26, 27, 28. And then there's those extra two about the Geopark support requesting further funds. So when we looked at these as a whole on the 31st of March and 1st of April, we're like, this is a lot of money in a few different directions. And Alex suggested, wouldn't it be better for the team to go away and think, what's the right level of funding that we should put into tourism Waitaki wide, and then decide how that is split between these organisations, or hopefully get them linked in together a bit more. So it's just kind of if we could get some direction about the overall level, and then we can decide how it's split, as opposed to drilling into the individual line items.
I just think that's difficult when we don't know what 390 is for and why it's being kept so separate to anything else. So that's a concern. And with other organisations, if we enable them, they get on and they do it, and they don't need any council resource to be able to do that. If we're intending to spend that other money internally, then it's going to require other resources and so on. So anyway, it's just trying to get a head around what the purpose is. and why actually is the geopark or the information centre not seen to be actually delivering, for the visitor economy anyway. I'll just go back to John and then Tim, if I can, and Brent.
I get a bit annoyed when I see this for the simple reason, this is a private enterprise thing. It's about tourism, which only brings in 4 to 7% of the GDP of the district, as opposed to 45, 50% that the primary industry is bringing. And I don't see anybody in that business putting their hands in the pocket to actually help support it. I think our job should be to actually facilitate and fast track some of these things that need to be done for the tourism, not pay for it, but help people actually get there and get to where they're going to do to provide the accommodation or the food or the rest of the system. If you just keep putting your hand out and we keep putting money in it, you're actually not achieving a heck of a lot, in my opinion.
Oh, look, I'd respectfully disagree with Councillor McComb's comments there. I think anyone that thinks the purpose of the geopark is just solely to deliver tourism is misinformed on what the purpose of the geopark is. Like, we've really got to familiarise ourselves with what it's meant to represent, and in fact what they actually are achieving out in the community at the moment. So, but I think if we look at the two items that have been proposed here, and earlier we were talking about the Civic Trust, all three are entities, if you like, that are delivering things for cents in the dollar, like on what we pass on by way of grant. And there's countless volunteers operating under all the umbrellas of these groups that are delivering services in kind for our community. So my preference is that we look internally for savings in this space so that we can distribute and enable communities that have plenty of goodwill in behind them in the form of volunteerism to continue doing what they do.
Brent.
Yeah, it was no surprise that I don't tend to agree entirely with Councillor McComb's sentiment either. A lot of us invest privately into promoting our region and getting into things as well. But I think, I also would like to know what the 390 is for obvious reasons. But that whole idea of going, we want this in tourism, and then perhaps we've got a really big opportunity here to bring some of our entities together to work together, which I know we've spoken about a lot in the past. Are we doubling up in marketing through Tourism Waitaki and Geopark? Are we, how can we look at this as a bigger picture and actually get more bang for buck? So I'm really supportive of having a budget item there for it, because we have to remind ourselves this is just a budget. It doesn't necessarily mean it's being spent straight away, but also wrapping some stuff around that to see how we can get better bang for buck, streamline these processes more, and also set some really clear expectations about what we return, what we expect in return for it. So, we're talking at the moment about having a budget there. I think it's an important part of our economy. It's an important part of our region, but it doesn't mean that it has to be exactly line by line as we're talking about.
Jim?
So look, I don't know, because I had appointments in Dunedin today that I couldn't not honour or meet. I don't know what you discussed earlier in respect of the geopark and other specifics, but one option with the geopark is to actually agree to fund it in full up to 2026, at which point we effectively serve notice on all the other agencies who keep on telling us how vital and important and critical it is, and contribute absolutely nothing to its operational or capital requirements. So, it might be possible for a $200 line item to stand for 1 year, but not necessarily beyond that. Same might apply, given what we've just heard in respect of the possibility of using alternative locations like the Opera House or some other facility, which I think has locality benefits that the current information centre doesn't.
Likewise, that 120 could stand but not be replicated in the following year. But if you look at the three line items, 4477, 4570 and 4090, you've got essentially $700,000 worth, $690,000 worth of budget allocated there. And I would have thought that, yes, we've got two specifics, 150 for identity and storytelling and 50 for the hub. Now, identity and storytelling could perhaps be broken down because I suspect a lot of that's going to be signage. And if it is, it should say so, because otherwise we're just going to cop flack anyway. But I think some itemising and or economising in terms of that 690 and some clearer identification of what might be an expense that would sit with Tourism Waitaki and the Penguin Colony, or the Tourism Waitaki via the Penguin Colony and ourselves, might also be appropriate. But I do think we've got a couple of hard decisions to make, particularly with regards to the Geopark, whether we are going to continue to be effectively the ongoing sole funder of this organisation that's supposed to be so valuable for everyone else, deemed to be so valuable by everyone else.
Other Jim, young Jim.
Thank you. It's not the way forward that we're looking at. There's a proposal there to spend 810,000 in this space. We need to be brave, so we go, no, that's 410,000. You sort out where it's going to be spent, because that's all that we can currently afford under the current regime.
How much did you add up?
810.
Yeah, failure. Right, Joe.
19, is it?
Thanks, Matt. So I just asked Mel the question, and her statement was the 390k was allocated to the visitor economy. This is the grant that Tourism Waitaki has received in the past. The suggestion, she believes, was for these monies to be used to support the visitor and tourism programme of work in the EDA.
Tourism Waitaki don't need it. Well, you don't need an EDA if they're going to cost a lot of money that Tourism Waitaki doesn't cost. It's a money go around aspect to it, but equally it's like we're not requiring ratepayers. Tourism Waitaki is not requiring ratepayers to fund their activity now. I don't think we should be increasing rates for this year to fund an EDA. Yes, Jim, and then Brett.
So on the basis of my arithmetic being corrected, I suggest 450,000 is allocated, and that's it.
I'm
spending is 50% of what it's requested. Let's be realistic. We can't afford it.
Well, that's what we asked for, was to come back with that. It hasn't come back quite as that, but you know, there's no reason if we were to grant the geoparks 200 no reason why we need to give them 50 as well for the hub. They can make their priorities, and I think for some of us at least, it would be contingent on them having a business case and a priority setting situation. So they've got a strategy about what were they spending the money on, because we can't have them just spend it on salaries and not actually achieve the goal of developing sites and the other things that are needed. The work that I've done with them has been to try and get other funders on board, and we are making some progress on that. And I would hope that there will be other funders. They're not, and it's not looking anything like the government is going to fund it as much as they do elsewhere. It's not like it's going to be regional funding as much as it happens around the world. It's going to have to be local community, and maybe there might be some national organisations that may look into it, but most of them don't have funding for this. We need to find the ones that do. Brent?
One of the questions I have asked as I'm attending the Otago Economic Forum is, and I have heard last year at a conference from Minister Jones that, you know, the tourism infrastructure isn't excluded from this. So I have asked that question as a question to that forum. So I'll be interested to get some feedback on that. I tend to agree that Tourism Waitaki have done an incredible job so far of when we've asked them to become self-sustaining. So I don't see why we need to be if they are self-sustaining. Investing more in there at the moment, unless we have a really good plan, and we've got to have a plan that covers all of tourism. Whilst I understand there has to be a structure where some of these sit separately with the trusts and the various things, a really clear business plan on working it, and the fact that we are using ratepayer money to develop these things, some really good accountability and measures coming back from these things. But it is an important part of what we can offer as a region, and it is very unique to our region of what we do have to offer. And if we want to look and be bold and brave and look into the future of what this can offer, it could be quite substantial. But we've got to make sure we're smart. I would support the giving tourism as a whole a line in there in the budget, and that we can sit down and work through what that looks like. I think that's probably the way to do it. So I'd agree with Councillor Thompson.
Very briefly, the only thing I would suggest is that perhaps being a little bit more pragmatic, I'd take it from 450 to 500. And cap the allocation and maximum of that. That's still virtually half of 910. Okay.
Noted. You're going to put yours on roading. So I don't think there's any disagreement around roughly the quantum. It's obviously some detail in which aspects of that get covered. So hopefully that's given you enough that you can put a number in, which is what you're after for today. It's 455. 455 is down the middle. 475. Right. So with that, I think we finished now. Have I missed anything else? Does someone want to give us a recap?
I was just going to check to see if there was anything that we needed to get, clarification on the direction. You feel like you've got what you need to be able to move on?
Microphone.
Yeah, do you want me to just spin through? So obviously we had a good conversation about operating budgets this morning. We'll go away and work out the impact of any of those changes and pull budgets together at the end of the week. In terms of the conversations this afternoon, everything in green has stayed as planned in the original project listing. We've deferred the airport runway and taxiway lighting a further year into 2028. Freezer building will leave as is, and Mark's going away making a plan. Ardgowan Forestry, so we're deferring half of it, split the cost out over a further year. Penguin Colony, we will leave that budget in as a placeholder. There's further conversations happening behind the scenes. We'll add an income line for selling property. We will have a conversation, deeper dive into Beach Road and put some information in the review room. Tennis, we have a placeholder project in there, but there's zero in the budget from the direction we were given today. Investment in tourism, 455,000. And officers will decide how that's split, but we won't show these specific line items anymore. It's just going to be.
We'll decide how it's split, but we need to have a separate wrestle around.
Okay.
Thank you.
The health hub will progress as per Brent's memo. I'll have to work out the numbers for that and build it in for the LTP budgets. Whitestone Civic Trust, we have parked Whalen Lodge. We didn't build into the budgets. Living wage, we will have to have a conversation offline when the time is right. Officers can look into giving citizens awardees a year's free parking or alternative sort of package for that. The bird aviary in the public gardens, we look to rehome. Parking strategy, a separate paper is going to come. We'll just leave the budgets as they are right now. The toilet strategy, we've decided that we will defer that 400K capex out for a further year into 2029. And the unitary council, no change at this time. It's probably something that will come up as part of the annual plan next year. So that's the summary of the day. We will build those into the budgets and continue working behind the scenes, and hope to have the first draft of the long-term plan budgets and complete 200 to 300 page document by the end of this week.
Just a quick comment on the Better Off funding. My understanding is there's a few things where we need to go into community and just, it's not going to change the quantum because it's all government money, but it's what it actually gets spent on. So just some detail and that needs to be confirmed.
Yeah, so in terms of the budgets, the same dollar figures will stay in there. The expense matches the income anyway. Nets off, we'll keep it in that 26 financial year, but the projects that specifically spent on will be worked on a bit further.
And I think, that's depending on how things are funded again, if we just use some of the money to pay off a water debt, that's a very easy thing. If we're spending the money on something which requires a certain amount of staff time, that's something quite different. So there are the other implications around what we're delivering and what we can't deliver. John, words of wisdom.
No, not really. I'm just querying why the freezer buildings number is still in there rather than being removed.
Where's that one?
I thought that's where we landed. So we have 50K in 26, the further scoping, and it's just the timing of having to lock in our budgets now. We might have better information by the time we come to key directions at the end of the month, or we go to adopt the annual plan, long-term plan in June. But at this point in time, the best information we have is if we have the 50K allocated for 2026, and then potentially the 200 might disappear in the next couple of months.
Tim.
Can I just ask a question regarding the 455 that we agreed on? Is that exclusive of the request from the Civic Trust? Because today for the conversation they've been separated out. So I just want to clarify that so everyone's on the same page.
I have taken it as separate. So we have specific line items for Oamaru Whitestone Civic Trust, which we discussed separately and landed in a different place. And then this investment in tourism is just for these items that we just touched on. Does everyone concur? Okay.
Yeah, that's as much as it's a visitor attraction. I think it's more about the heritage preservation aspect. And okay, everyone, thank you very much for all your contributions today, and Mandy and Amanda and the wider team. Thank you very much for all the work that's gone into this. Yeah, I know you haven't all been able to take off as many holidays as some others have in the last few weeks, so appreciate the work that you've done. Just about bringing it to tears. But no, thank you everyone for what they've done to bring us this information as quickly as they have. It is appreciated. And hopefully we're giving you some reasonable direction along the way. Still a few things to develop, but we'll have further discussions on those. So with that, thank you, and we'll finish this workshop.